My name is Brittany B, and I am a child marriage survivor in the United States. Life as a child growing up in an LDS family, a Mormon family. I was the eldest daughter, and I was also one of 10 children. When you are not taught about your own body and what's okay and what's not okay, you're taught to trust men because they have power from God. You become susceptible to abuse. And that's how I was introduced to an adult man in his 20s when I was 13. And it started very innocent. Compliments, sitting a little bit too close, playing games, and then things became more intimate, more personal. And that's when the molestation started. And that occurred for about a year. And then I was introduced to his friend who was also in his 20s. That man continued his own set of abuses, including abuse, verbal abuse, physical abuse. That went on for many years. Finally, he convinced me to leave with him. So he traveled from Salt Lake City to Colorado Springs, and he picked me up in the middle of the night, told me that if I didn't come with him, that he was going to have to bring this to my father, who I was terrified of. And I went away with this man, and I was with him for several weeks. When I was recovered by the police, my parents made me marry him. By the time that happened, I was 17. 4 years of horrible abuse landed me in a marriage that I could not escape. I didn't know anything about anything. I didn't know about maturation. We were not allowed to take education. And the first thing that he said to me after I signed that paper was that he has lived every man's dream. And that still haunts me. I still feel unsafe to this day around men because I don't know their intention. It's in my bones. It affects everything that I do. It's taken me almost 11 years to rebuild my life. And what I didn't know back then is that I did not have access to domestic violence shelters, homeless shelters, or divorce until I was a legal adult. So escaping was very difficult. There were a couple of instances within our marriage, within our relationship, our time together as married people, where I had to identify what I was willing to tolerate. One of those was when I got a phone call in the middle of the night. My brother had called me and he said, "I need you to come pick me up. I'm scared." And he was also in his 20s. He was an adult. And so I had to wake up my husband and say, "We need to go get my brother." I was not allowed to drive the car. And he had specifically purchased a stick shift because he knew that I would be incapable of escaping with it. So we went to go pick up my brother, and we were stopped at a red light, and he was hitting me, reaching over, smacking me, yelling, being abusive in every way. And the person behind us, in the middle of the night, laid on their horn because the light had turned green. And my husband, in a rage, started swerving like he was going to hit this car, and they were doing this back and forth. Well, the other car pulled a gun and he aimed it at my head. If I stay with him, I'm gonna die. There was another moment where he was yelling at me, and it was also in the car, and he pulled off into a parking lot and he hadn't stopped. So the car is rolling, and he leans over, he opens the door, and he unbuckles me and he's shoving me out. I'm punching, and my legs got caught in the seatbelt, and he took my shoes. And I rolled out of the car, and he drove off, and I walked back in the middle of Salt Lake City to the apartment, and there was a bag packed, and the door was locked. And that's when I left. I grabbed my bag. I slept on a Walmart park bench in the Walmart parking lot. across the street from our apartment. And I got up the next day and I called my mom and she wasn't willing to take me in. I called my grandparents and they weren't willing to take me in, but they did loan me some money. I used that money to purchase a car. That's how I escaped. So I continued to try to facilitate a relationship with my parents. It was very tough. It wasn't until I became pregnant in 2019 with my daughter, and that was many years after escaping, getting on my feet, joining the military. It was when I became pregnant with my daughter that I realized what happened to me was not okay, and I would never, ever want my daughter to be in a situation even remotely similar to the situation that I was in. I met my current husband 10 years ago, and we dated on and off for about 2 years, and then we moved in together. Got our first apartment when I was 20, and then when I was 21, we got married, and that was after I joined the military. A couple of years had passed, and then we decided to start a family. And I became pregnant with our now 5-year-old daughter. It's been a long journey. Those first couple of years, trying to manage my post-traumatic stress, my anxiety, my depression, my coping mechanisms back then led me to drink excessively to manage the stress and to manage the grief. Trying to facilitate relationships with my parents and my family still during that time, I wasn't aware that I was harming myself by not setting boundaries with them. But you don't know what you don't know. You have to grow, you have to learn, you have to try. I really started to love my husband now, and I realized that if I'm going to let him in, and if I'm going to accept him and feel safe, we need to get therapy. And so we have been in therapy for many years, and we have gone together, we've gone separate, and it has helped me to facilitate a healthy relationship with myself, with my own inner child. It's helped me grieve. It's helped me find healthy anger for what happened, and it's helped me build a healthy relationship, a trusting relationship, a safe relationship. And when we finally felt safe enough, we decided to have a baby, which has brought so much joy to my life. And there's nothing that I wouldn't do to protect her. I finally found Unchained at Last, which is a nonprofit organization, and I discovered them in 2020 when I was living in Germany online. And I reached out to them and I realized that there are thousands of women and men who have experienced similar situations as I have. And immediately I joined their national coalition to end child marriage in the United States. And I'm currently a part of the California coalition to end child marriage in the United States. And I frequently meet with survivors and work with Unchained at Last, advocating against the practice of child marriage in the United States. What's upsetting about child marriage is that there is no escape. Your spouse becomes your legal guardian, and that means that your spouse has to file for divorce. So children who are currently in a marriage right now and want to leave do not have the ability to do that. That means that if the child were to go to the police, they would be turned back over into the hands of their legal guardian, who is their spouse and often their abuser. This is a horrible fact, and I'm far from the only story. There are thousands of us out there, and I meet with these survivors often as I can. And finding friendships after not being allowed to have friends who weren't Mormon, it was hard not to judge people, because I was taught to be so judgmental. And I had to turn inward and talk to myself. Why am I judging people like this? Why am I rejecting others and their diversity, their cultures? I had to deconstruct that. Minorities and people of color are suffering greatly because they are not being protected either from child marriage. I managed my post-traumatic stress disorder and my trauma, my depression, my anxiety through sport. I am a yoga teacher. I meditate, but I also have promised the public that I would swim, bike, and run 3,000 miles to raise awareness towards the issue of child marriage in the United States. I love racing triathlon. It is an enormous passion of mine, and I'm happy that I get to show my daughter perseverance, endurance, resiliency. I want my story to be coupled with inspiration. You do not have to be alone. You are way more capable and way stronger than you think. I want to show the world how strong I am. And most importantly, hold on until you are 18 and we can get you out. Hold on. Hold on.